I'm Nick Petrie, and you're watching The Crew Reviews.
Well, sometimes the price you pay when you want to promote your new book is that you have to spend an hour or so with a couple buffoons on a podcast. Well,
Knuckleheads. Knuckleheads.
knucklehead, exactly. Well, welcome back to the Crew Reviews, Nick. And just so our audience doesn't assume that this distasteful part of your promo tour did inspire the title, why don't you start out by giving us a quick rundown of what you have in store for Peter Ash this time out?
Well, this is a book that readers have been asking me for really since the beginning. So this is a book that is sort of a deeper dive into Lewis's past and Lewis's former life as a career criminal. So Lewis is, as readers may or may not know, Peter Ash's best friend, sort of a flip side of the coin in a lot of ways. And so, the other thing that happens typically in a Peter Ash novel is Peter finds someone or someone bumps into him who is in trouble and needs help, and Peter dives in, and then things start to get pretty ugly, and Peter calls Lewis. So in The Price You Pay, it's Lewis who gets in trouble, and Peter who is the one who's called to help. So I get to sort of turn some things upside down. I'm diving a little bit deeper into Lewis's life, which was a bunch of fun to do, to kind of imagine his criminal enterprise.
Yeah. Well, it was fun to see that, and we were two of those people that were, whether we were calling it outright for or just subliminally, we wanted to see that story. Um, Setting has always been a very effective and powerful component of your books. It's as vivid as your characters, which are, again, as finely drawn as anything in the genre. And The Price You Pay is no exception. For me, the winter season was just as important as the physical location. Might have just been my imagination, but the frigid, sort of unforgiving weather seemed to enhance the themes. Was this a conscious decision, sort of, to enhance it through that, or was it just how you visualize the story when you started telling the story?
Well, in part it was sort of, well, what did I do last book and what did I do the book before that? So in part I'm trying to, kind of not repeat myself somewhat. But I did want something where, the world would be entirely unforgiving. And February in Wisconsin, today notwithstanding, it was 45 today,
Oh, spring,
and
spring-like for you.
sunny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it was really nice. Um, but Wisconsin in February is generally very unforgiving, and so it was just, and it wasn't something that was conscious. It was just sort of a way to sort of dial up kind of the tension and the immediacy of it. I don't, I don't make a lot of those decisions intentionally. I'm for me, I'm really just, it's a very instinctive process. And sometimes when I get stuck, I'll realize that I've done something that was the wrong thing, so then I'll have to go back and undo. But for this one, it was just a bunch of fun to kind of put these two guys who I'm really fond of now after 8 books, to really put them through the ringer like that.
So when you were doing this, it wasn't outline, title, TBD, and then winter.
No, God, no. It's so I'm always looking for a situation. I mean, that's what I start with, right?
Mhm.
And so I even really started that first chapter is when Peter wakes up in the middle of the night in the dead of winter, and he's heard a noise, and he has to kind of unwrap himself from June Cassidy, his girlfriend, and find the underwear where she's
Yeah.
thrown it,
Put on his
and
shorts.
yeah, and grab the gun from underneath his bedside table, screw on the silencer, and no reason to wake the neighbors, as Peter says.
I love that line.
And he sort of creeps down the stairs, and I knew who was going to be there. But it's a fun way to sort of start something with tension and with some sort of suspense. And that was about all I knew. I knew that they were going to go up north to rescue this guy, but I didn't know who he was or what he was going to be like. And in a way, this, upstate Wilson, Teddy, sort of took over in a lot of ways, a lot of those scenes.
What do you think, Sean?
Well, you're speechless,
Yeah, I know.
No, it was great. I was waiting for Chris to go with his
or
question.
you're napping.
No, it was I mean, you didn't necessarily, you had a setting or a situation. We have a format. And so I was jumping ahead a little bit. But let me jump back as I was asking that a question. So in The Price You Pay, you explore themes of redemption, love, and the idea that one's past doesn't necessarily define them. So can you share some insights into how those themes like influence the character dynamics between Peter and Lewis and how they added depth to the thriller genre?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I have an answer to that. Usually I'm 3/4 of the way through a book before I really realize kind of what it is I'm interested in and writing about. Because I am really focused on sort of the scene I'm working on, and maybe I know the next one, and maybe I know the one after that, but maybe I don't. And at a certain point, I get stuck, and I go back to the beginning, and I sort of say, "Oh, you know, I wrote this, and then 3 chapters later, there's this, and there's sort of some of this imagery that recurs." A lot of the work is done somewhere in the back of my head. It's not. I'm not smart enough to write the way that you seem to imply that I write. I think there are people who work like that. I just am not one of them. Every time I try to, um, I don't know, kind of get ambitious in that sort of way, it always ends up badly.
Well, I sent a message to the guy. We send messages as we're reading the stories and stuff. And I the first couple of chapters in, what did I send Sean? I'm gonna try to find it. It was like, God, Petrie can fucking write.
No, absolutely. We talk about it often. But I think we joked one time about the fact that standing by the counter, staring off into space with your cup of coffee is writing, and it takes a while for the wife to understand that. Your wife, my wife, any probably Chris's wife as well. But I think this is kind of that in action, because the themes of your books do have the sort of feel that, holy crap, this guy put so much thought into this theme because this all ties together. So I think that's when that's coming together for you. Probably you think you're working on the story, but I mean, it's your themes are always so prominent that it's just, I guess it's hard for, and we believe you, but it's also hard to imagine that they come out that well when you do write the way you do. Because I know that I think you've said that you don't outline, it's a process of discovery for you. But I'm wondering, is it always the first scene that you sort of start with? Do you ever like say you picture a scene and it's the strong image that you start with, and then you find out later it's like what way further in the story?
Well, first of all, thanks for your kind words. It's almost always the first chapter. Sometimes I go back and I write a prologue, or sort of I write something that becomes the second chapter, and I have to go back and start with something else. But it seems to be something that I need to. I can't know too much. I have to know that there's something happening, but I can't know too much, or I sort of lose interest. So I am really am sort of trying to find kind of what happens. Actually, this book. So I don't think you guys, we've talked about this. Maybe you and I did, Chris, when I saw him in DC. So I wrote for 5 months this book that sort of died on the vine. And it was this Lewis book, and what happened, I wanted to dive into Lewis's past, and I kind of went there, and I couldn't get myself out. I was having too much fun. It was too, um, it was this sort of caper with Lewis and his
Mm.
crew, but it never, like there wasn't enough there, and I couldn't figure out how this was going to relate to the some other thing. And so I basically sort of decided that this was it. This was the wrong thing, and I put it aside. And I ended up talking to a bunch of writers. I talk about this in the afterword. People who were like, "Yeah, I wrote a book that I didn't think was any good, and so I wouldn't give it to my publisher." Um, I called another guy I know, who there was this long pause. I said, "So have you ever had a book that just died on the vine?" There was this long pause. And he said, and I thought he was like going to make fun of me or, sort of shame me for my stupid writerness or something. And he said, I think that's actually happening to me right now. So I they don't always turn into something.
You have 5 months though, Nick. I mean, that's
Oh yeah, no. Well, that's why it's been 2 years since the last Peter Ash book, right? So this is wise. Some of these books come out more easily than others, for sure.
right.
Was
The
your
interest.
go ahead.
Well, so but the thing I did with that start, that kind of in Lewis's past, is I turned it into a novella. And it's called The Cleveland Job, and you can find it. It's in Mystery Tribune, which is this great quarterly crime magazine. So you can find it online. You can buy the magazine itself. Just look for Mystery Tribune, Nick Petrie. But like that's a totally fun kind of accidental, thing to do with something that I thought I was just going to have to throw away. But like the previous book, I wrote 4 different starts to 4 different books. I mean, it's just, and it takes me 2 or 3 days. I mean, sometimes it takes me 2 or 3 weeks. And it's like, well, yeah, that's not good. Oh no, that's even worse. Oh, this one's really bad. So, it's the Nebraska book, The Runaway, I had to actually get in my car and drive to Nebraska. and in order to sort of see it and feel it and to kind of understand how something might come together. It's a very mysterious process, and I try not to think about it too much. But I do, I do feel like I'm not really a grown-up writer in that way. Like guys like, Greg Herberts is always the guy who comes to mind because he's so prolific and he's done so many different kinds of things. But somebody who just shows up and gets to work, and he knows what he's doing and he's moving forward. And it may not actually be like that for Greg. We've never really talked about it. But for me, it's just always kind of a mess, and I just have sort of gotten used to the fact that it's a messy process, and that I have to be comfortable with sort of this level of self-doubt and uncertainty. That is just sort of the price of admission for me.
Well, having done this show well over 100, I don't even know how many times we're at right now, but it's amazing how diverse that experience is for writers. I mean, because I'm probably more like you in that regard, that I'm kind of like, bumping into things in the dark, and then, oh hey, there it is. And then there's other people like Brad Thor has gotten to the point where he almost doesn't revise anything. He just pretty much goes, and that's his first draft is really close to his final draft. Then you have an outliner like Kyle Mills, who's very, so it's always fascinating to me. But something you said made me wonder. You talked about how it's been 2 years since your last book. And this is we talked to a lot of writers who they have editors who are super unforgiving about even their draft being a couple of weeks late. How is your publisher and editor in that? I mean, where they understand, do they know you and your process well enough to know that, hey, we've got to let this process play out? Or
they do. Every once in a while they sort of lean on me, but in general they're very kind. My schedule's been totally out of whack since my 5th book, The Wild One, which was another one of these books that just I thought I knew what I was doing, and it was just pulling teeth. And so I was like 8 months late on that, and they barely got it out on the planned date. And then I've just been sort of trying to claw back, months with every book. And then this one, it just totally went out the window. So in the publishing industry, they say there are 3 things that a writer can be. And you only need to be 2. So one is talented, and one is easy to work with, and the other is on time. And I'm not that good, apparently, at being on time. I'm a Midwesterner, right? So like it pisses me off.
Yeah.
Like I feel bad, and I think part of the reason they're so nice to me is that I feel they know how bad I feel about it, and I'm not fucking off. I'm not going to the beach. I'm not
Right.
like I am in my office grinding away. It just sometimes it takes longer.
There's Catholic guilt, and then there's Midwestern guilt.
What you need to do is have an office away from your house so that your excuse can always be, my car wouldn't start. I had to wait. I had to get a jump, and by the time the car got going, the day had gone. So.
I got to tell you though, my wife is like, she's a stickler on if you're on time, you're late. Like she's always about that. So, and she's from Ohio, so
Well,
Midwest.
that's what I was like in my previous professional life, right? So I was always 15 minutes early for every appointment. Every job I did as a renovation contractor, we were finished early. Like that is, it's how my parents raised me. It is totally a Midwestern thing. So it really it stresses me out. It's like it's not a good thing, but it also like at a certain point, like I just have to sort of let go, and because otherwise you get all clenched up, and then nothing's happening if you're all pissed off at yourself. So at a certain point, you just have to sort of accept where you are and move forward.
Well,
And
and
you're
it's
an
easy
art.
to be on.
He's an artist. He's an artist. Sean.
I was gonna say it's easy to be on time when you're making widgets, but the thing is it's it's hard to talk to. I mean, my wife obviously is used to it now, after years of different writing projects and stuff. But it was a learning experience to be like, you're not done with that yet. You're not done with that. No, I'm not. No, not at all. Not even close. But
Yeah.
No. Well, the novel, the price you pay, it delves into stigmatized conditions like PTSD, addiction, mental health, grounding the story in reality amidst the action-packed plot. How did you approach incorporating these like real life challenges into the narrative? And what messages or awareness do you hope readers take away from the way these issues are portrayed in the book?
Well, post-traumatic stress has been in the series from the start, as you know, and that really came about because I met a bunch of vets. I had a bunch of clients who were vets after the surge, and just having those conversations, I sort of had my eyes open to what uh, sort of the consequences of combat and kind of how challenging it can be to come back to sort of normal life after years at war. So that's kind of where all that came from. The rest of it, I really write about stuff that's interesting to me. So, I'm crazy, so I'm interested in mental health. All of that stuff, addiction, it's all around us. It's, I don't know. I'm interested in how people. I mean, they're all, both of those are actually related to post-traumatic stress as well, because it's how do you solve the problem of life? That was a line from one of my writing teachers years ago. And he said that good fiction should try to solve the problem of how to live. And like, I think I mean, we're all hopefully sort of trying to figure that out. How do I become the best version of myself? How do I, get all the things done that I want to do? How do I be a better, husband or father or whatever? Um, so I'm really interested in those things, and it all sort of comes into my book, but I don't say, let's see, this book is going to be, I'm going to do this. And um the mental health piece with Teddy, and his kind of his brain damage issues, that I've just read a bunch about that stuff,
Hmm.
because like what is it, brain blast damage, all that stuff is part of uh, our recent adventures in the Middle East. It's one of those things that really messes people up, and you look fine on the outside, but your brain has been compressed by a blast wave and isn't working right. So part of it is just, I mean, I read a lot of stuff, and my brain just sort of just picks it out. Um, Margaret refers to me as the veritable font of useless information,
no,
Nice.
which is kind of the definition of a writer,
Yep.
I think.
that's
Well,
that.
I
I
did.
call that often.
Ted, I was as you were talking, like you're talking about Teddy and his brain damage from like blast waves, and I was like, yeah, I think his eyeball popped out and it was a
Well, he
bullet.
got shot in the head.
Yeah, I
I
know
mean,
he
let's
got
be fair. He
shot.
got shot in the head.
Well, you've been writing, and this is book 8, but you've been writing Peter Ash for around a decade now, maybe a little more, even.
A
I'm
little
not even
more.
sure. But so, what is easier about writing this character in his world, and what has become more difficult?
What is easier? It's easier to find Peter. Um, I used to sort of, I don't know, I used to sort of have to write myself a little thing about sort of what's happened since the last book and like what's Peter's state of mind, and especially those first kind of 5 books where I'm really charting a journey through his post-traumatic stress towards some kind of a normal life for this guy. So I had to think a little bit with every book about sort of, kind of where was his head, right? And what was he thinking about? And it's he's pretty easy to channel. I'm not a veteran. I am not Peter Ash, but he has a kind of my sensibility. It's my sense of humor, my interest in people and interest in the world. So that's gotten easier. And like the relationship between Peter and Lewis and Peter and June, like those all come more easily now. What's harder is that, writing a series, you need to, there's a line in the business, with whether it's television or series fiction, they want the same but different,
Yeah.
right? So you have to calibrate how much is the same and how much is different. And for me, that's always a challenge. And now that I'm 8 books in, it's like, well, let's see, I've done this, and this, and so how about that? Yeah, no, I did that kind of. So part of it is just sort of finding something else to talk about becomes sort of the challenge. Is where have I been, and what kind of stuff have I done, and kind of where am I still interested? So I mean, I think that's the challenge for anybody who is writing something that is a long running series, and I guess 8 books is kind of a long running series at this point.
Sure it is. Well, even with your characters having such distinct voices, and you're so familiar with them, do Peter or Lewis or June often or rarely say things that surprise you and make you wonder where the hell they're taking you?
Oh, sure. That's for me, one of the joys of writing is when somebody, I mean, sometimes it's those characters who will say something. June is often surprising to me. Um, Lewis really surprised me in this book. Um, I mean, I go kind of deep into Lewis's soul here,
Hmm.
and I was sort of like, wow, like okay, like I didn't like I sort of I knew in theory sort of what his backstory was, but I didn't really understand sort of the transformation he had gone through from then to now.
Yeah, with
Um,
the family and kids and
yeah,
and stuff.
yeah. Um, but like the pleasure is when somebody like Teddy Wilson shows up, who is just a total piece of work. Um, or what the hell was his name in The Breaker? Edgar, the guy with the axe.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah,
he just
yeah.
kind of showed up, and
Yeah.
I guess there's a part of me that wants to swing an axe, or hold a guy out the window, for example. I mean, there are people that I have had the urge to do that to.
Yeah.
None of them I'm looking at right now, but
Yeah, it's because Mike's not here. So expanding on the subject a little bit, the novel has a relentless pace and unwavering commitment between characters, particularly Peter, Lewis, and June. So can you share more about how you approached character development in this installment, especially with a focus on Lewis's backstory and the dynamics that strengthen the bonds between these friends amid intense um, adversity?
well, again, I'm not sure I think a whole lot about character development so much as sort of, I mean, in my mind, these are real people. And
Mm,
so it really is about, and not to sound schizophrenic, but it's like, so, what does June want here? Knowing what I know about June, what is her take on this? The one challenge with Lewis was the more I really dove into his backstory, I sort of did some rough math, and it's like, if they did 10 jobs a year, and between the 3 or 4 of them, they killed 5 or 6 people a job. So we're talking about 500 people,
fucking serial killer, like
right? So I like I mean,
A
that's what I
lot.
had to sort of come to grips with, this idea that I had of him, and then really, bringing it into the real. And what are the consequences of that? And so he had to both have a very strong kind of moral code
Mhm.
and a sensibility about what he was doing and why. But then he also had to have this sort of internal reckoning with it, and not wanting to do that anymore, to be that anymore. And that, both of those, like that and his current self, sort of inform each other, right? And I mean, again, it sounds like I'm super deliberate about it, but in practice, what it means is the writing stops,
Mhm.
and I say to myself, what's wrong? Like, what have I done wrong here, or what choice have I made that's not the right choice? Um, and so, like, I kept getting stuck on, like, Lewis. Kept getting. I mean, this is a guy who's been in he's was in the very first book, right? I kept getting stuck on this vision of him, and I couldn't figure out how he was going to think about it. So I sort of had to think about it, and that's kind of how that came about.
So the emotional depth and heart stopping action are it creates such a powerful impact in this book. So how do you balance the intensity of the action with the emotional journey of characters like Lewis, especially when delving into his past? Like how, because we're Sean and I, we're aspiring actors. We have writers. We have lots of and actors. We have lots of people who watch our
I have
podcast.
my
Who
SAG card.
he does have a set card, but watch the show and it- you can go heavy on the action, and then you forget about the character development. Like where's that fine line? And do you stress
Well,
about that?
I do stress about that. And actually, this book, it took a lot. That was, I think, one of the real issues with this book, because there is so much action, but the intensity of the character stuff um, is pretty heavy duty as well. And so how and you need these rest breaks between these crazy action sequences, right?
Yeah,
So,
like a long drive through Cleveland and
for example,
yeah, New York.
yeah. So part of it is just, you have to sort of find the places for that to happen. Um, but it's like, sometimes you just kind of have to redefine what you mean by action, right? So there's a scene where Lewis and his wife Dinah are having a fight, right? And so they're not, there are no machine guns. They're not hitting each other. They're having an argument, but it's an argument with real consequences, right? And so, that carries weight, that carries tension. So not every action sequence has to involve, fists or guns. And everything is an opportunity for character, right? So to me, that's sort of the fundamental point. That Steven Spielberg has this line, you tell a story on a moving sidewalk, right? You're trying to do everything at once, right? And so, how people act in a fight will tell you something about who they are, ideally, in a perfect world. And who they are at rest will tell you something else, and might tell you also something about how they are, uh, in action. So
Mhm.
but again, as a practical matter, every day I go back, through the last day, 2, 3 days worth of work, and I just read. And, well, that's not the right word. And I sort of, well, I should change these sentences around. And I sort of tweak and I play, but all the time it's sort of like, is this moving fast enough? Do these characters seem real? Is there the emotional intensity there? And so, I mean, that's kind of my process. It's, 2 steps forward and 2 steps back and 3 steps forward, ideally, in a given day. But, all you have is your own sensibility, right? So, if you're somebody who you're writing, White House thrillers, and there's a nuclear weapon on the loose, and it's this 3-letter agency and that 3-letter agency, and some China is involved, and those books are going to be very different, right? Those books are going to be, very much a certain kind of authenticity and a lot of story. And because you're bouncing through many characters with a lot of those stories, there's not a lot of character involved,
Mhm.
right? Or if you're somebody like, oh, I don't know, like Sean Cosby, S.A. Cosby. You know, those books are, you know, I'm looking at
Totally
Razor
character
Blade.
driven. Yeah.
Yeah,
Razor
you know,
blade
like Razor
tears.
Blade Tears. There's actually not all that much that actually happens
Right.
in that book.
There's a
It
bar
really is all
fight.
about,
But yeah.
yeah, I mean, it really is all about sort of the emotional weight of it and the character's internal, you know, sort of torment.
Although
So
there
I
is a
mean,
wood chipper in there where one of the
in that
body,
one,
you know, yeah.
well, and there is a large explosion as well. So no, and you know,
Way to
they're not
derail his
devoid of
way to
plot.
derail his
I
point,
know.
Chris.
Yeah,
No,
I'm just
I know
thinking. I'm just
exactly.
thinking. S.A. Cosby. Shawnee goes. We're like, hey, can you? I'm totally going off tangent here, but Sean goes. Sean, I think you asked him. Yeah, give us 30,000 foot view, and he's like, it's this, and then at the end he goes, and there's a wood chipper. We're like, dude, that's awesome. But you talk about being like schizophrenic, like that just popped in my head, and I had to get that out. Sorry.
well, so like he's a super interesting cat, right? You know, crazy smart, right? You've talked to him.
Yeah.
Crazy smart. He's got carrying all of this literary history in his head. I had a conversation with him where he told me that his pandemic project was to go to the Library of Congress website and find what they listed as the 100 best novels of all time and read them. Like, you know, that is not a regular thing, right? Like that's not what I did during the pandemic. I mean, I don't know. I'm a fan. Let me just put it that way. He's a interesting cat for sure.
Yes. I did see that list. Somebody else posted that list, and I checked off the ones I'd read, and then made my a pledge to read the others. And I don't think I've read any of the ones that I hadn't read yet that were on that
Well,
list.
you got farther than I did,
But
so
it's it's in my head to do. But as you were talking, I know one of the things you've given as advice that I've actually done. I haven't done it enough. Is
uh-oh.
no, well, I did a lot with screenplays. I didn't do it. I haven't done as much with writing books, and that's get a book that you love and outline it, and kind of follow the beats and list the beats, list the whatever, and kind of see why that book has such a hold on you, and then you're not copying the book, you're understanding what about the narrative and about the story made it so powerful, so then you can replicate that in your own voice and your own sensibility. That's my thumbnail sketch of what I think
Yeah.
what you've said about it. But beyond that, are there any, like, you read a lot, but do you read like I don't know, like The War of Art, or I don't know where all my
Oh,
writing books are.
I read a bunch of that stuff. I love The War of Art. I've read that a couple of times. Bill Schweigert turned me on to that. I listen to podcasts. Brian Koppelman's The Moment, I think, is a particularly good one. He's gone into more songwriters lately, which speaks to me a little bit less. But he's a showrunner, screenwriter.
Mhm.
Those earlier shows, especially, really kind of knocked my socks off. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all important stuff. Because I have had some issues getting my books out. I mean, I'm really interested in, you know, sort of the nuts and bolts of how it works for other people. I'm interested in sort of, you know, the neuroscience behind creativity. I mean, there's great stuff out there. There's a guy named Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, something like that, who wrote a book called Flow. He's a sociologist or something, which came out in the 80s. And it was like, it just blew my mind away. It was like, so yeah, this is why you should do one thing and fall into it. You shouldn't check your email every 10 minutes. You shouldn't, you know, all that. I mean, you know, the brain science stuff has been kind of a more recent interest of mine, just because, again, I'm trying to understand myself. I'm trying to find a way to be less crazy.
Mhm. And I mean, I get that as a parent. Like, my kids were raised in the screen generation, and I think about the ADHD and the ADD that even whether it's clinical or just casual, that generation has to deal with on a, and I've tried to break my own self of those habits, and it's very difficult. So I've been reading a little bit more about the how we can rewire our brains as
Oh,
well.
it's huge. It's huge. So like this week, right? So this is, as we're having this conversation, this is the week before the book drops. And usually I don't turn on my web browser until 5 o'clock. My phone will not ring between the hours of 10:30 at night and 5:30 at night, right? So I'm trying to be no notifications whatsoever, but I have to be on email this week because there's all this stuff happening. Reviews are showing up. I got to put stuff on social media, and like I don't know how people who work grown-up jobs do this all the time. Like I feel like my
Fucking
head's
impossible.
exploding. Yeah.
Yeah. They hire people. I hire people to do that stuff.
I guess.
They must.
Well, I think in one of our first conversations, maybe the very first, we asked you, I think Chris was the first one to ask you this, if you had any interest in writing a standalone and at the time you were too engaged with kind of building Peter's world and learning more about Peter to entertain that idea. Well, I understand, if I'm not mistaken, the next Nick Petrie book will in fact be a standalone. And if that's true, what can you tell us about it?
It is true. And I've got about 10 or 15,000 words left in it, so I'm coming up on it, which is always a very exciting part of writing a book. It's about a guy named Bobby Cruikshank, who is an ex-con, lives in rural Wisconsin, and his little brother Paul, who was sort of always the best of the family. Went to college, ended up going to law school. He's got 2 kids, lives in Minneapolis. Somehow ended up stabbed to death in the parking lot of a roadhouse, not far from where he grew up. And the sheriff doesn't really have much of a clue. And so Bobby, who is trying really hard to kind of keep his life together, he's only been out of jail about 9 months, just can't let this go. He's got to figure out what happened to his little brother. And so, that's this book. I don't know what the title is going to be. I have learned to not get attached to titles because the ones that I love are never the ones anybody else likes.
What was the younger brother's name?
Paul.
Paul Cruikshank.
Little Paul.
Little Paul. So 11 years younger, so almost like a child to him.
Awesome.
I'm in. I'll read it.
I'm in for anything you write, my friend. And
Fuck yeah.
with that said, you have reached the end of the main portion of the interview, and just take this time to tell our audience to buy this damn book, pre-order it now, or just show up at the bookstore when it opens and make sure you get your copy. It's fantastic.
Thank you, guys. By the way, it's just really nice to see you guys again. Like I really missed this.
Yeah.
So do we.
These conversations. So I'm glad to see you guys back doing this stuff, and good to see your ugly mugs, even if only virtually.
Well, we appreciate that, but it's really good to honestly. I was very cognizant of the fact that it was 2 years between books because there's only a handful. I mean, I there's a lot of things we read and we discover every year that are great, but there's a handful of authors that it's like anticipating a holiday when their books come out, and you're one of them. And I can honestly say you are one of very few authors that I've never read a book and went, what is best? I always feel like, holy crap, he's done it again. Holy crap, he's done it again. And that's a select few. I mean, with as much as we have to read. So
well, I appreciate that. It means a lot
fans.
coming. I appreciate that coming from you guys as well, because I know you read a lot of stuff.
Yes, we do.
We do.
Although this year has definitely not been like last year, just because
real world.
Yeah, the real world intruded way too much this year. But having said that, let's have a little bit of fun and let's go into the lightning round. You're well aware what the rules are here, and that's that there are no rules. My first question, I have no idea if you're a college football fan, but it really doesn't matter because you attended both Washington and the University of Michigan. So when the National Football Championship game occurred, were you in a no-lose situation or were you in a no-win situation? So where does your allegiance lie?
Neither one. I've never been to a Washington game. I was in grad school. I was working. There was no time for student life. I was an undergrad at Michigan. I did go to plenty of those games. Both my parents went to Michigan. My niece graduated from Michigan. My grandfather and his brother went to Michigan. My grandfather's brother was an All-American basketball player for Michigan.
So there was no way you were going to Ohio State.
No. No. And so actually my dad passed away like 11 months ago. And so
Oh,
Sorry
he
to
was
hear
the
that.
world's
okay.
biggest Michigan fan. Had, Michigan hats, Michigan sweatshirt, Michigan shirt, the whole
Oh,
anything that had Michigan on it, he owned, usually 3 or 4 of them.
wow.
And so talking to my mom about, she just was like, oh, he would have been over the moon.
Yeah.
Well, then
Yes.
I will not do any of my planned Michigan besmirching.
Sean,
No,
I'll
Sean
move
was
on to
totally gonna
question
do it.
2. I'll move on to question 2.
No,
Um,
I saw Sean's first question, and I was like, hold on, I go throw on my zip up. He's like, ah.
Well, your first appearance on this tour was on a show called Virtual Obsessions. And we were wondering, what does that host have that we don't have that she got you on before us?
Oh, well, actually, it's called Authentic Obsessions, and
Authentic
that's
Obsession.
yeah.
Sorry,
No,
Authentic
and
Obsession.
no, that's all good. That's because that's my wife's podcast. So she was actually supposed to be. She agreed to be my interviewer for the pre-launch party event at Boswell Books, but then she bailed, and so she said, "But I could maybe interview you if you want."
Oh,
So we had a very nice conversation. I'm not sure that her podcast is something that would be necessarily of interest to crime
I
fiction
think
fans.
her podcast is actually, I think a lot of our viewers would enjoy it.
Well, see, what I love about it is that, whether you're a visual artist or a sculptor or a quilter or a painter or whatever, like all of the issues are the same, right?
Mhm.
If you are trying to do something creative, it's all the same kind of muscle, and the obstacles are all the same too. And so that is what I love about that podcast, is because it really is people talking about sort of the process of making art and of getting yourself out into the world. And, again, it's sort of that self-doubt and
Yep.
uncertainty and moving forward piece.
Good.
But I do sleep with her. So, that's, she's got something that you don't.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
where can people listen to it?
Authentic Obsessions is on pretty much every podcast.
So like Spotify,
Spotify, Apple,
Okay.
She thinks she's on like 8 different things.
Awesome.
And this is, I did one with her 3 or 4 years ago, was our first one. And it was, we talk about things that, most, that I don't talk about at most interviews, because most interviews are just not that kind of that intimate. So
Yeah.
we talk, what's it like to be 2 creative people married to each other, right? Weird is what it is.
All right. So Nick, one of the first pieces of advice I ever got about writing was never kill the dog. I don't have a question. I just was curious if you ever heard that.
I have heard that. And it is one of the challenges about writing a scene that has Mingus in it, because Mingus is, well, technically Lewis's dog, although Mingus is really kind of his own dog. But like you want to put every character at risk, but like, you can't really do that. But if a dog happens to be killed, for example, that the person who does it is really a bad son of a bitch, and
Right.
and you have the right to do whatever the hell you want to that person.
True.
That's pretty good answer. That's pretty
Your
good.
hero can't kill a dog. Let me put it. That's
Exactly.
maybe the refinement of the principle.
Okay. It's corollary. All right, Christopher, you're up.
All right. So I won't ask if Taylor Swift is good or bad for the NFL, but I will ask what you think
I think that's a no-brainer. Taylor Swift is excellent for the NFL.
Yes, she is. Yes, she is.
I mean, what the
Dude,
I don't want to get into politics.
Most
No, I
people are
gotcha.
just some people are stupid.
I almost think that that's a manufacturer. I just can't even believe that that's a thing. I can't.
50, almost 56 million people watched the last game. So that being said, what are the odds that she headlines Super Bowl halftime show next year?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I hope the Swifties aren't, paying attention to this, but her love life, apparently, I'm not a big Taylor Swift person, but has its ups and downs. So, I'm not planning the wedding yet.
So she could have heart. She can write a song about
Travis Kelce. Yeah, she could.
And then it's on the halftime show next year, and it's pretty bad.
You broke my heart, you talented lug.
I sent my daughters are both big. I mean, one's 25 and one's 18, so they kind of right in that wheelhouse. They're both huge fans. And my older daughter, I think, has been to see her 4 or 5 times. But when that whole thing happened, I sent we have a family group chat called Team Cameron, and I sent in the family group chat a 10-track album of what it would be when they broke up, and
Oh
it had
yeah.
titles for 10 tracks.
You said that to us. Yeah, I saw that.
My daughter, my one daughter thought it was hilarious. The other one just gave me the side eye. But
All right. So you mentioned jarhead as being an insult to Marines if it comes from someone other than another Marine. So, or were there any other insults you were thinking of using uh, in the book?
Oh, I like insults. I try to come up with as many as I possibly can. I have been trying to be less profane. There is a certain contingency among my readership that are quite devout and find certain words to be more offensive than others.
Dude, you
So
can't say that because you dropped a big MFer in Lewis's. I expect Lewis to talk like
well,
that though.
so you guys know Brad Taylor, right?
Yeah.
So Brad, when he's done with a manuscript, he gives it to Elaine, his wife, the DCOE, and she does what Brad calls the fuck check. How many fucks is he allowed to have? So like this is something that he really thinks about. And so he told me this story and I thought, oh yeah, I should probably do something like that. And I don't want to piss anybody off for a
Right.
dumb reason.
Right.
And I got something from another writer who was sort of chiming in, who said that profanity is just laziness. And I really sort of thought about it, and I think she was right. So I look at the places I use it, and I don't know, like I mean I use it in my daily life quite a lot, as you can tell. But
Oh
as
my.
well, yeah, I was in construction. I mean, come on. Um, but I think as a writer, it loses its impact, and B, it's sort of a cheat. So I've started to think a bit more about how I use it, and I don't, because I don't like getting those Facebook messages saying, I really like your work, but I'm never going to read it again because you said GD 6 times, and
I didn't say that. The bad guy said it.
right.
Come on. All right. So you said you were in construction. So the president of the Woodworking Hall of Fame, conveniently located in Milwaukee, has asked you to provide a piece for inclusion, big or small, in their newest exhibit. What are you giving them?
Oh, you mean something I made?
Yeah, whatever.
Oh
Something.
dear God.
They've come to you.
They've come to
Or
me.
what would you make them?
Or yeah, what could you make them?
Well, lately my specialty has been bookcases. My last house had a lot of wall space, but not a lot of bookcases. So I was doing built-ins. This house, there's no room for anything, and my garage is smaller, and there's no power, not enough power to push my big table saw. So my hands have been idle for 2 years, and it's kind of driving me nuts. I need to. Actually, Margaret and I were just talking about this, about the beauty of making something physical in the world. And a book is physical, and that's why every writer does those unboxing videos, because there really is something magical about holding it in your hand. But I need to get back to making stuff. Dining room table, more bookcases. I don't know. Who knows? Toolboxes. I like making toolboxes.
Really?
Yeah. I have
Have you
You know what they say?
door?
Doors. Like
Have you ever made like a front door?
I've never made a front door. I built windows though.
Okay.
God, he's awesome. I build windows,
It's fun.
bookshelves.
He is awesome.
He is.
Proof. Our friend Nick Petrie is awesome. The price you pay, whatever you pay for this book, it's well worth it.
Not enough.
What's that? Not.
It's not enough. However much you
It's
pay,
not
it's
enough.
not enough. Yeah.
But the price you have to pay for this book is definitely worth it. So get out there and buy it. Nick, as always, love having you on. Don't make us wait 2 more years.
Yeah.
Oh God, I hope not. I'm finishing this book as fast as I can.
And we're looking forward to the standalone. We'll definitely check back in with Peter Ash someday, but we're looking forward to the standalone as well.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not done with Peter. That's not going to happen.
Good.
But
Good to hear.
it's just good to try something new.
Absolutely.
Cheers, brother. Cheers.
It's dry January.
Back at you.
With water.
Oh no, I'm sorry to hear it.
Christopher,
Yeah, sure.
another great hour. I love that guy.
He's
Truly.
awesome.
I mean, we're not saying that to boost him up. He is truly one of the best natural, purest writers in the genre or in any genre. I've said before, he could write literary fiction and be just as much of a success.
One of our favorites.
Absolutely. And again, he freaking blows the doors off of it with The Price You Pay. Come read about Peter Ash and the wonderful Lewis and their descent into the darkness of Lewis's past.
Pretty good. I'll raise a glass.
I'll raise an empty water bottle.
So next week, it'll be
Yes.
February.
Yes.
We're drinking. We'll drink it. I don't have to pull any days from like March or April or.
The good
for-
news
for
is
dry.
I've been buying bourbon as if I was still drinking it, so I actually have a stash for a change.
See you, folks.
See ya.
Not a little.